Welcome to the OC. I'm Phil, and this is my co-host Corey. And tonight we are talking about.
Oh, this is a good one, and it's a better one than last week's because this is somebody who's got some serious cred. Probably seriously crazy, but still serious cred.
Yeah, Jack the Ripper.
That's right.
Not Jack the Stripper.
Not Jack Tripper. Not Jack Tripper.
Jack Tripper, especially. Or Jack the Stripper.
Jack the Stripper. Do you know a Jack the Stripper?
I'm not going to say anything. Maybe.
We've all done things in college we're not proud of, Phil.
That's right. Back in the day. So I'm really red. You notice? I was working outside. Look at this.
It's a healthy glow, Phil. It's a healthy glow.
This is cancer. I'm pretty sure that is a. Yeah. That's melanoma at its finest right there. Those are skin cells.
Yeah, that's what you get for not wearing a hat. Probably didn't have sunblock on. And you laughed at me. Remember when we were on your stupid boat and I looked like John Wayne Gacy with all that sunscreen on?
Okay, yeah, but you didn't. No, it didn't actually rub into your skin. So I
rubbed some. It's all over your truck. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Don't, folks. When you buy sunscreen from Costco, it expires eventually, and it turns out it doesn't. Yeah, very chalky.
You look like one of those pygmies, with the.
My war paint.
Your war paint. I'm like, what the hell is he doing? And you had a Tilly hat on.
Yes, to keep the sun off my beautiful face. See, this is why I don't look like whatever the hell you look like right now.
Red.
Yeah. You looked orange before you started playing with your settings.
I had to. I'm on fire here. Well, this was an interesting topic.
I knew a bit about it. Like, I wouldn't go and say I was an expert on it, but it was certainly one of those. And there have been a lot of things about it in popular media. Okay. Jack the Ripper, again, because of the fact that he was never caught, which is spoiler alert, folks. Nobody knows who Jack the Ripper was. They have some suspicions, some that are crazier knows, which we'll touch on, but he was never caught.
Never caught. I think I didn't know anything about that time period. And I especially didn't know anything about, I really didn't. I was like, 1880. So we're looking 1888.
Yep.
Queen Victoria era.
Totally. When you think of the Victorian area where the top hats, and by the way,
was she an ugly chick? Wow. Like next level. Like, oh.
It's very judgy, Phil.
I know.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you're very judgy with that.
Did you see pictures? Because I'm like, Queen Victoria. You always hear Queen Victoria. And then I'm like, oh my God, you do not age well.
And then you think of Queen Elizabeth, right?
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
Like how Queen Elizabeth.
She was pretty in her day,
Very much.
But Queen Victoria.
But the Victorian
lot of inbreeding right there.
Yes. The Victorian era was always fascinating, right? So this was the era when they decided you put opium in everything and it fixes you. So
you just get that opium right in you.
Get the opium. You're like, hey, look, you're having trouble sleeping. You know what'll fix you up? Opium. Hey, you hurt yourself. Sure. Opium.
Sure.
You're tired? So opium.
And gin apparently.
Gin
was cheap.
Gin was cheap. And what was latium? Latium was like opium and wine mixed together, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I think that's what it's called.
It rectally or something.
I don't. So this is where you talk about things. They had the smoke enema, the tobacco smoke enemas.
Really? So they blow smoke up your ass.
Tobacco smoke, and the idea being is that yes. Now I don't think somebody's actually puffing on it. Like I think they would use a machine because remember the Victorian era is very much the steampunky. They had gas lights, they had steam engines, right? So they would have something. So I suspect they would have a little
some dude in a hose.
Remember our previous episode about
this up your,
Well, this is not the first. Funny enough, we're completely off topic with this, but
for sure, yeah.
The idea of there are people who will do like alcohol that way, like they will because it gets absorbed. Yes, it will get absorbed faster through your large intestine. It's like I guess it short circuits the.
It's kind of going backwards if you ask me.
I haven't looked into it, Phil, but
I mean, wait. Okay, so I don't know. I thought there were sphincters in the way or something.
Yeah, but that's the idea. You got to put pressure, right? You're not just.
Oh, you've got to.
You like there's pressure and stuff going through. I mean, the colonoscopy, the sphincters ain't stopping that. So
I'm not judgy. You want to put things.
You did. There. You just judged Queen Victoria.
No. I stated a fact. There is a fact. That is an ugly fucking human being. But I am not judging if you decide to put things rectally, inside of your body. By all means, it's your rectum.
Don't kink shame, buddy. Don't kink shame.
Yeah, exactly. You want to.
All right.
Do it.
Anyway, back to topic.
So we're 1888.
Yep.
Right. That's when this
late summer. We're talking end of August, like August 31st, I think is the first case of this.
Well, I don't want to interrupt your time or your timeline, but I did want to point out before we even got into this is that I had no idea about where our story takes place. Right.
London.
Whitechapel. It's in Whitechapel. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that the poverty of Whitechapel.
The people on top of people on top of people.
Horrific. It is Armageddon every day of your life in Whitechapel. It is the most dangerous place in all of London.
And it's only like a square kilometer or something. Like it's not even particularly big. It's not like this is a massive area where you've got what was the population of Whitechapel?
Well, they said I didn't get an exact population, but of 1,100, they figured there was about 1,100 families, like family units in Whitechapel. 800 of which all lived in a one bedroom house, like not a house.
Very Charles Dickens. Very Charles Dickens. When you think about that whole
they slept
abject
and
poverty.
They ate and they did everything in this one room, and also the poverty was so bad, but most people were homeless, right? So they would try and get enough money during the day, and that's what leads us into this story: is that Jack the Ripper had countless people that he could, target. It just so happened that hookers tended to be his,
And some of the suspects, when we get into the suspects later, you'll see where they try to link it back to, okay, this person was, he had a problem with prostitutes. He hated women.
Now, the other thing that I had no idea about was that Jews were being persecuted in Russia. Okay.
Oh, the pogroms, pogroms. Or I want to say programs, but it's like pogroms.
No, yeah.
It's like POGRAMs.
Yeah. So there's this huge influx of Jewish community that's been coming because they're trying to escape. I mean, some of them went to Israel. Some of them.
Well, Israel didn't exist in 1888.
Well, the state of.
Did not exist. So they went all over the place. So a bunch went to Germany. Are you telling me you were surprised Jews were persecuted throughout Europe?
Okay, no, I'm not surprised. It seems no matter what era you're in, Jews are being persecuted.
You pick a
Why do we have to pick on the Jews? Can we not leave the Jews alone? Yeah. I'm just saying. Jeez. Anyway, but so that leads into this story too, which was some of the suspects, right?
Which also led into some of the problems why we don't have an actual Jack the Ripper caught, because the last thing as I had read, and again, we'll get to it, but just a bit of a spoiler, some of the people that were taught, speaking out, didn't want to say, hey, so-and-so did it because they're a Jew. It's like, well, if I say that's them, I'm a Jew, they're going to assume all us Jews are Jack the Ripper.
And stuff like that did happen. Yeah,
completely.
Completely. And it was really because there's a lot of anti-Semitism and they're taking our jobs and whatever else.
But they were living in abject. So
absolute poverty.
They were living in the same poverty. Now some would do better, some would do worse, but.
Yeah. And that was, so what it said here, common lodging houses. Yeah. Just to get, so this is where these people would go when they were homeless. There was a big, 2/3 of the population.
Did you read about the street shanties? They would have a lean-to set up, and you could rent it for like a shilling a day or a week.
It was
or something.
8 pence for a double bed, and then 4 pence for a single bed. And for some, I don't know what it is. It's like a fairling or something like that. You could sleep in a box standing up. And yes, this is a real thing. So and lots of women and children, and if they had no money, this was one of the last.
Did you read about the workhouses?
No.
Oh, don't. They're even worse. So that's where you totally get into the Charles Dickens kind of, indentured servitude, slavery stuff. Where it's I just
didn't realize. Yeah, well, I mean, these are people that are they're starving. They're just absolutely destitute. And most of the places in this area, the police would not go alone. Like, they would have to have groups of police officers. They were like, it's like red light districts. Like, nobody fuck. All right, I'm not chasing that dude into there. That's Whitechapel. But anyway,
not exactly a great police presence. So surprise if you're going to have a prime. So think about a prime hunting ground, one where nobody cares about anybody because everybody hates everybody and you're all competing for something, right? You've got no police presence at all.
Right.
You've got
1,200 hookers.
Yeah. Yes. And lots of victims.
1,200 prostitutes. That was a rough estimate of that time. And it was one of the few ways that women could make money.
Correct. Right. Now, I was reading up about some of the victims, which we'll get to, and you read their list of professions, and they would say casual prostitute, as opposed to,
because they didn't have money.
Because they had to supplement their earnings, right? So if they're working as a seamstress or whatever, and they're like, well, how can I make some extra dough?
Well, or I have to make some extra dough.
Exactly. It's not a question. I don't think it's a question of, man, no, I really want to buy myself something nice. I think I'm going to become a casual prostitute. It's like,
I don't think that anyone, I mean, there might be a few that choose the life of prostitution as a choice. But I think most people are, they're forced into it. And believe it or not, 60% of all streetwalkers are men. I know that sounds crazy, but like
that was not a number I would have guessed.
Right? Most people wouldn't, but young men.
So we're stealing those jobs too. Great.
Right? We can't.
We probably get paid more as well. Wait, no, actually, I think it's the inverse. And I think it's the inverse when you deal with that in the sex trade industry, that men make less than the women.
You would know.
I remember reading an article somewhere where they talked about it, that particularly in pornography, for example, men who break into it, it's like, you're going to make less than the woman, because guess what? There's less of them wanting to do this job than you.
I think it's there's less women watching. Maybe then. I don't know about now. I mean, I think the way the world is.
But we're getting off topic again.
How about you take us down the road?
Down the road.
Let's journey to see what happens with Jack the Ripper.
So, for those who don't know, Jack the Ripper was a serial killer operating in Victorian London in the Whitechapel district, sometimes known as the Whitechapel Murderer, but they have actually expanded the Whitechapel Murderers to be more than just Jack the Ripper.
Right.
Between August 1888 and November 1888.
Right.
He's got 5 canonical victims. And canon, in case you're wondering, are basically, these are the victims that everybody can agree on were his. There were 11 total during the Whitechapel murders, which I think ran to like 1889. Right.
And he wasn't the first murder, right?
Oh, no, there were others.
Because there were two. There were two before. No, but so it was 2 murders. So everyone was kind of on edge, because even though murder it was a violent place, it wasn't a lot of murdering people. A lot of stealing, a lot of beatings, a lot of just bullshit, but nothing where people were being killed. So people were on edge. Carry on.
Yeah. So the idea that we got 5 canonical victims operate from between August 1888 to November 1888. So 4 months. Okay.
That's
and they're canonical because this is and 2 reasons. One, the methodology used in the slaying of them are all relatively similar enough. And the police said, these are the 5 that Jack the Ripper did, and all the other ones weren't him. Now, whether that was legit or not, who knows?
Right.
So the first victim was Mary Ann Nichols in August 31st, 1888.
That was my grandmother's birthday, by the way, August 31st.
Really?
Huh. Yeah.
That's good to know.
I'm glad everyone out there is like, what the fuck? Anyway, Mary Ann Nichols. Yeah. So...
Yeah. She was the very first one that was attributed to Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
And she wasn't, by the way, Jack the Ripper, FYI, at this point.
We don't know who he was.
Correct. Yeah. He was just, it was just a murder at this point.
So she was discovered at 3:40 a.m. by Buck. What's it? No, she was discovered in Buck's Row.
Yes.
Right.
At the entrance, in a gated stable entrance in Buck's Row.
Interesting about this woman, she was trying to make money for a bed. She tried to go to one of the lodges And she didn't have enough money. She said to the guy, "I will get you the money. Just can I stay the night?" And you're like, "No, you don't have money. Get the fuck out." And so she was just like, "I'll be back with some money because this is what I do. You know, I will peddle myself, and I won't." So obviously, she met the wrong person.
Exactly. So her body was found. The cops were called, and this is one of the things where, so she hadn't been as badly mutilated as some of the later ones were.
Well, she was disemboweled, though,
but still not as bad. Like, so
not as bad. No, so she was disemboweled, but her throat was cut right to the spine, right?
Yeah,
which is, that's saying something.
Right to the vertebrae, and the thought is that these were so the disemboweling was post-mortem, so she was dead when she was disemboweled. The throat cut was done when she was unconscious. So the theory is, and this is where the cops start to say about the canonical how they were killed, right?
Right.
So she was found with her skirt raised up above her knees.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so the theory is that our good buddy Jack, and you'll see this in the other victims, they would present themselves by raising their skirt up, and while their hands were occupied, he would strangle them. Because they found pressure on, and this was common through all the victims.
No, you're right. And he would bleed them while the heart was bleeding or beating.
So the killing stroke was usually a carotid artery severing while they were on. So, and they would be lowered to the ground.
Right.
But there was no bruising on the back of the head. So they were really like, okay.
Weird.
Police tactics at the police forensics at the time were like non-existent, but apparently the forensic pathologists, the morticians, I
don't even know what they maybe
the guys who examined the dead bodies in the morgues.
Well, they were doctors.
Guys, I mean, they were they were doctors, but
right,
they could only operate on, they could only do stuff. And I don't know if the 1888. So do you remember at one point you had medical students had to steal cadaver. They either had to buy cadavers from shady individuals to do.
Was that 1880s?
That might be even earlier. That might be earlier because at this point,
earlier because medicine's coming a little ways, right? Like medicine is in its, you're able to, childbirth is not as deadly and all sorts.
Well, I won't talk about it this time, but there's another where there's a doctor who actually got committed later on in life into an insane asylum because he was insistent that doctors wash their hands when they're working with corpses and then go give help with childbirth, that they should wash their hands between those.
Oh, and he was crazy.
He was crazy for, how dare he say that?
How dare you wash your hands?
But this was the case with the whole, the forensic pathologist, right, would go off and he said, well, there was no bruising on the back of the head. So the person did not get thrown to the ground.
No,
they were lowered. Now, in this case, she had bruised. Both sides of her face bruised by either a fist or the pressure of a thumb before her throat wounds being inflicted on the left side. So they said basically that
she was strangled.
She was strangled, right?
Unconscious.
And then bled through the carotid artery. And
so that they could be disemboweled without blood going everywhere.
Correct.
That makes sense. Yeah. So that is pretty, we'll get into details of the other, but this was probably the most tame of the
That's what I was saying about the mutilation that happened here was not as bad as the mutilation that happened later with the other ones.
I thought the first one was just her throat was cut. Then as I started to dig into this, I'm like, oh no, okay. He did disembowel her, like he did open up her body, but nothing was missing at this point. Yeah. So you can imagine the Metropolitan Police, which was also known as Scotland Yard, right? Metropolitan.
They keep talking about the two as the same thing. So
because
there was one. There was the City of London. So there was one that was
there's like two police forces, which was
one
also,
under the mayor of London, and the other one was under the
and that's why it was kind of Whitechapel was sort of on this cusp of the two police forces. It was almost like the perfect place where, jurisdiction wise, and these two police forces did not like each other.
There was some competition, and
sure.
the police, the public perception of police is they're not going to solve any crimes. They're just going to crack people's heads open during riots.
Yeah. And So who was one of the detectives that there was a couple on?
So the two I focused on was McNaughton and Aberline. There were a bunch of others. There's like a Swift.
Charles Warren was another one. Eh?
Yeah.
Aberline is he's the most familiar with the Whitechapel area. He knew this area.
And he was a crack detective, and McNaughton was the police superintendent or police major inspector, or whatever, at the Sir Neville McNaughton. So that's who I didn't focus. There's a lot of worker bees in here. Like we've got, you can pull up the whole PCs that worked on it, right? The PC police constables, I guess that's what it stands for.
Yeah. Well, one thing, so they did find a lead when they were, because they started to question people, right? And it was the guy, they said that they saw Mary talking to a man in a leather apron.
Yes, the leather apron guy. Yes.
Which, I didn't know this. I mean, so local prostitutes would talk about him. They said that, this guy threatened them. He'd shake
him down. He had a leather apron, and he would threaten to cut them if they didn't pay him a share of their take or something.
Right. So this also breaks out, some of this racism too towards the Jews, because a lot of the Jews would wear these leather aprons for a lot of the trades that they did. So it was very, but they ended up finding out who it was. John
Pfizer, Pfizer or Pizzer.
Pitzer. Pitzer.
Yeah.
And he went and hid. He was like, "Fuck you guys! I didn't kill anybody, so I'm just going to run away." That's fine.
Well, it's funny you mentioned. So you mentioned the whole witness aspect, right? So forensics at this time, investigation consisted of: did we catch the person in the act? So you could almost see a flow chart. Did we catch them in the act? No. Okay. Is there anything around in the scene to suggest that's like who did this? Like they left their business card or their cart, or somebody saw them there. Okay. Let's expand. Let's start asking people questions and get them to confess. That was police. That was police, and that was the investigation. So
maybe this guy knew. He's like, I got saw.
I've been
seen.
I've got exactly right. So
yeah, I know how this goes. Yeah, he's pretty smart to the fact.
But we take everything for granted, right? So we think of Sherlock Holmes. We think of modern day forensic techniques. Fingerprints didn't come in till much later. Like the whole concept. And forget checking for hair samples or blood or other bodily fluids. Forget that. It's like, that's blood. Whose is it? Well, it's blood.
Yeah, like you're looking even late 70s. They had not even DNA testing. They had, I think they could test blood type, obviously, but
they could do the blood typing, but they couldn't necessarily, like they could say, hey, this is type A positive. What the scene was type A positive.
So this is the correlate. Yeah, so they can provide him. Yeah, so, but what happens is that a lot of the Jews are being targeted and beaten up by gangs of people once this news gets out. So there's all this like crazy hatred.
The anti-Semitism really boils over on this. You actually see, I don't think so there's the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, which vigilante, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't form till I think somewhat later. But again, this is only 4 months, right? Like let's keep this in mind.
Beginning.
This is the very beginning. Right now, they're like, okay, this is a murder, and it's exceptional. It's because most of the murders before, if somebody got murdered, like they got beaten to death. It wasn't like they had
the two guys that find her too. I mean, this is a time where you don't have a phone. Everything's word of mouth, and everybody wants to talk to everybody. I mean, even when we were young, we were not that old. But it was word of mouth. Everything
not
was
1888 old.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm saying though. Like you tell somebody that something, and the fucking next thing everybody knows.
Yep.
But this
and the news. Don't forget, the printing press has been out, and the news was a big thing. So they were totally this was sexy. This was if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing.
Ooh. Oh, I like that. Is that yours or is that?
No, I've stolen that from somewhere. I don't know where I stole it from, but it's that idea that when you have something like this, it draws people in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it also scares the shit out of people.
You stoke fears, right?
For sure. So that leads us to the next murder.
Annie Chapman. She's the next one. So this was Mary Ann was murdered August 31st. Annie Chapman is killed September 8th.
6 a.m. He likes to be out late at night. So there was another witness to this one, right? And they thought they saw her with a rather short man they described as a foreigner.
Yes, the short man described as a foreigner. Okay, thanks for narrowing it down, right? Yeah, that's a great description, right? Foreigner.
Yeah. So
and they actually heard that. So witnesses say they heard a woman say no before hearing the sound of something or someone falling against a wall or a fence.
Right.
But they did not investigate. So the person who heard this didn't say, well, it's Whitechapel. I mean, that happens all the time.
And you would think people are on edge, a little bit, Yeah, I think, is this the one where the man sees, he thinks it's just two people having a scuffle, like a man and a woman having a scuffle?
I don't think so.
Is that who the witness was? There was one of them.
I think that's a later one. So.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I think in this one,
it's none of my business.
In this one, it's more like I heard something. Yeah, big deal. Like it's like,
right. Yeah, because they start to interview all the prostitutes because the prostitutes are out there at this time. Right. So, and what was her wounds like?
So she's so this is where things, again, you see some of the same patterns, right? She suffered 2 deep slash wounds to the throat from left to the right before the murderer mutilated her abdomen. A blade of similar size and design was used. Okay. And they had blood. So there was more blood splattering.
So didn't he place the intestines on one shoulder?
So I don't know if so with her, I read about that later. So this is the one where they talk about a leather apron partly submerged in a dish of water located near tap was also discovered near her body.
Yeah, which was unrelated.
Unrelated, but they call it out
kind of a weird. Yeah, but there was more mutilation to her body than the
correct.
Yeah, so
they had mutilated her abdomen. Yeah, so that's the one thing.
Womb.
I heard the womb and uterus is where you start seeing this. But
surgically. Now this is something that they start to go to doctors, and doctors are like, "Wow, okay, this is surgically."
So this is where they start looking at their things and saying, "Okay, well, who could do this?" Right? So surgeons and doctors, butchers and slaughterers, right? So all of a sudden, somebody who's handy with a blade who knows how to cut.
Right. And I think some of their investigation was actually, medical students.
Again, it gets so. For the record, folks, there are over 100 possible suspects for it. Later on in the podcast, we'll talk about the ones that after they kind of narrowed down to the most likely, but still. So the beautiful thing about this, Phil, is we think about now how much we are about the rule of law and due process and that.
Yeah.
I don't think about that in the Victorian era. I think in the Victorian era, I think of hang them high. Like I'm thinking like the cop goes, here you are,
dude would have hung. There's no question. Gallows.
But it's the fact that all the suspects they didn't charge anyone.
I think because they didn't have enough information.
But that's the thing. Yeah. Do you think there's an era where they needed information? They were like, we got to shut this down. Let's charge this guy.
Yeah, but then he just keeps doing it.
Well, or he stops. Again, this is why they only the 4 months, right? But,
yeah. I don't know. That's a good point. I don't know.
So,
but where do we go from there?
Well, okay. So we've got our friend Annie. That's September 8th.
Annie Chapman, yeah.
Right.
So they offer a big reward after Annie because now people are like, what the fuck?
So in case you're wondering what her occupations were flower seller, crocheter, beggar, and casual prostitute.
Yeah. There you go.
And she was married at the time too.
Yeah. A lot of the prostitution, they were family.
It was a way to support the family.
They had no choice.
Yeah.
It was like, and this was how they were going to make money. And she was pretty brutally murdered. I mean, so what else was there? More Jews are threatened.
Yeah. Things are getting bad. So
major racial discord. There's like, this is not good. Not only is there a murderer there, now there's a bunch of people who are hating on, all these immigrants, not just the Jews, but immigrants, in total.
So the most important thing that starts to happen after this is, so Annie Chapman was killed. She was killed the 8th of September. Okay. And this is where this is where things start getting a little weird. So it starts getting weird and interesting. The Dear Boss letter shows up on the 25th.
Oh, right.
It's sent on the 25th, and it's
you have the letter?
Received. I do. Yes.
You want to read it?
Okay, here we go.
How long is it?
It's not that long, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I might have to do it with an accent.
I think you should do it with an accent.
All right. Dear boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about leather apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Oh. Grand work on the last job was, which doesn't make any sense.
I guess the last murder.
Yeah, but just the way it's broken up, right?
Okay.
I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with that, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officers just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp. I want to get to work right away. If I get a chance, good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. P.S. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands. Curse, no luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha. So that's the Dear Boss. So that's the first time a name is associated with this. And that's after the Annie Chapman. Once the news service got this.
So, yeah. Nice Scottish accent, by the way.
I don't know what I was doing there. I don't know if I was doing Scottish or Cockney or.
It was a little.
This is bourbon, so
the Scotch. If it's nae Scottish, it's crap. Yeah. So the letter, was it ever proven that it was real?
So originally, the thought was the letter was a hoax. Okay.
Oh, by a reporter or something.
Well, so later on, they thought one Tom something or other had forged it, and then another reporter had admitted, like a deathbed confession kind of thing, to forging it. Right.
Okay.
But there's that, and then there's the saucy Jack. So but let me just
saucy.
Yeah. So this letter comes in, right? And it's considered a hoax at the time. Like, okay, whatever. And FYI, folks, there were hundreds of thousands of letters received by the police department about, like, everybody was right. But there are three main ones that are considered.
And this was one of them.
This was one of them. Like, because this was really the first one that was, you started to see the association with Jack the Ripper, the language used. So Elizabeth Stride was killed 30th of September.
Yes. Lucky Liz.
That's
what they called her. Lucky Liz.
They called her Lucky Liz.
Not so lucky.
Not so lucky.
Yeah. So they figured she was the one. Okay. So she's the one I'm thinking of. She was the one. She just had her throat cut. Isn't she the one? Because they figured he was interrupted.
Little clean, tailed off the right jaw, blah 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 blah. Small knife blade, body being watched to some source. Yeah, I don't seem to see the whole.
Yeah. So no. So
hold on single switch slash to the left, to the right.
Because they figured that something had happened. He was interrupted. He must have heard someone coming.
Yeah.
He's like, "Fuck, I'm out of here." Because this is at about 1 a.m. They find the body or whatever. So this is the guy. Sorry. So this was the guy. Israel Schwartz sees Lucky Liz with this man having this altercation with this man, doing whatever they're doing. But he thinks that he's this man here struggling for something that he figures it's a domestic fight. And I'm just like, I'm not going to bother. This is not chivalry at its finest. So then, Catherine Eddowes
Okay, so this is now we go back to our letters, right? So this was 30th of September.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Saucy Jack postcard arrives on the 1st of October. Okay. So this arrives on the 1st of October. It reads, I was not codding, dear old boss, when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jack's work tomorrow. Double event this time. Number one squealed a bit. Couldn't finish straight off. Hadn't not got time to get the ears off for police. Thanks for keeping the last letter back till I got to work again. Jack the Ripper.
Right. So that's a very telltale.
Yes. Yeah. Now, but this is where people are wondering. They're like, okay, based on the way the timings are released. So remember, I don't want to say Diana. What's the one on Netflix? They've got a series called Ripper, docu-series called Ripper Street.
Oh, it's an actual, it's a good
right. And you hear like what the police are giving out in press conferences.
Oh yeah,
boggle the mind. I'm like, why are you telling all those details?
Because I think they didn't know at the time, right? I mean, the press, they're like, well, the press isn't going to, say anything.
Well,
they're on our side.
Aren't they?
Yeah, and this was starting to like where police are like, okay, we need to really like shut everybody up. There's, because so let's go back to Catherine Eddowes. So she's killed that same night.
Correct. So Catherine and Annie, Catherine and Elizabeth Stride it's known as the double event.
Yeah.
So that's where the letter comes in. Sorry, a bit of disconnect. The Saucy Jack postcard says the double event. And that's
let's just back up a second. So he's like, I find this girl, I'm gonna kill her.
Yep.
Something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna leave her alone. And then I find me another one. Mm-hmm. And that's Catherine Eddowes.
Yeah, Catherine Eddowes was killed. So they found Elizabeth's body around 1. And they found Catherine's around 1:45. Like
1:45. What's funny? Not funny, but funny is that Catherine Eddowes was released from prison. Like she was in the clink, and she was released from prison like that evening.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was like she was like blood out of a drunk tank or whatever. But so her throat is cut to the spine. He's ripped her from like to their breastbone. I guess the way that. So the breastbone is like she's opened like an autopsy type idea. Mm-hmm. And then he cuts off a chunk of her nose and a piece of her ear.
Yep. Crops the ear.
Yeah. And slashed her face over and over and over again.
But again, it's still the same MO. Like there's more mutilation happening, which again is the frustration.
It's almost like he's pissed off, right?
Like he's pissed off, right? Because he wasn't able to work on Elizabeth to the level he wanted. So he sort of takes it out on poor Catherine.
Yeah. And they find her in her apartment, like she has a small room or whatever, and that's where they find her, right? That's
I think the apartment was Mary Kelly. I think you're thinking the Mary Kelly. So she was found in the southwest corner
13
of
Miller's Court. Yeah. Oh, okay. So she's found. Okay, but
she's found out. She's found. My understanding is she was found outside. It's the only one that was found inside a place, as opposed to on the street, was Mary Kelly.
Mary Kelly. It was her little apartment. That's the one that was okay. Let's not talk about that one yet.
We'll get to that one. Yeah,
that one's like that. That was like I did not know Jack the Ripper did that shit.
Yeah, so she was so there was great disfigure in the face, and her intestines were placed on her shoulder, and I think one of her kidneys were taken. Right, this is the one where one of her kidneys were taken.
Took one kidney.
Yes.
Ripped her to the breastbone. Cut V's under her eyes. I don't know why.
Yeah, and it's some weird stuff. So there's mutilation of the face, which is clearly not a casual, not putting designs. I mean, maybe aside from the V's, but
the kidney was carefully cut out. Yeah. These are surgically removed.
Kidney was carefully cut out, and you had the innards were placed on the right shoulder, which is weird. Like it's very weird, very weird.
Like, what is this guy doing to get off on this? Like, what is this? Like, what's motivating him? I don't know either.
This is the thing, right? So they've talked about the whole idea of hatred towards women, hatred towards prostitutes in particular. So the question is whether prostitutes were a target or simply, I guess, targets of opportunity, right? So because again, like we said, you had the whole idea of I'm coming up to you. Hey, let's get it on, lovely. And then when she goes off to, everybody wore skirts at the time, right? And they were big skirts. So,
well, not just that, they would take you to a place where they knew they'd be safe in order to the cops wouldn't catch them, right?
Yeah, or that they which is usually disturbed. A quiet, dark place,
right? It's a place that they're like, so they're doing half the work for him. If they're doing all the heavy lifting for this for Jack the Ripper. They're saying, okay, well, yeah, and he's probably a lot of the from what I read, he would have had some money. He wasn't poor.
So none of the suspects struck me as being like destitute poor. I mean, no. There were only a few that struck rich, me. But they might not have been rich, but they didn't strike me as being.
He could write, for one thing.
Well, okay. If the have you seen the letters?
I did.
Yeah. Does that look like?
But better than most. The most common people couldn't write or even fucking read their names. I mean, they could write sign with an axe.
Sure.
So I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it says, but I think if anyone has that kind of skill, surgically speaking, that might be something to consider.
It's some manner of education. But again, as you've pointed out, butchers would also have this ability, right? If you're familiar with butchering livestock, right?
I am.
So you could, I mean, if you did it enough, you could be practiced enough, I guess.
I think, yeah, but I mean, you're talking about, it didn't seem like he had a lot of practice, right? So this is human anatomy. It's different. But
you're also seeing the evolution of the technique too, right? So as you pointed out, he appeared frustrated with this one.
He appeared frustrated because he was probably because he got interrupted.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm pissed off.
Apparently he removed it in about 5. They're saying it would have taken about 5 minutes to do the work to remove the kidney. So the kidney alone, the way he did it, would have been about 5 minutes.
And he didn't really damage anything else. So that
other than the disemboweling and the mutilation, he removed the kidney without damaging
other organs. Yeah, like he didn't go in there and just start slashing and hacking.
Correct. He didn't hark his way in. He actually looks like he targeted that.
And he removed it in such a way that it was like surgical. Like doctors said, well, this would be how we would remove a kidney from a cadaver. So, yeah.
This is known as the double event. So with Stride and Edwise, the double event. And then the Saucy Jack letter comes in, Saucy Jack postcard comes in talking about. Now, again, the idea of what information was available at the time was the postcard sent
Right. Now, this is where their first real clue is found, right? They find something where he wiped his hands.
Where the knife was cleaned. They said there was clearly something where he cleaned.
Yeah, they found a piece of Catherine's apron or something. There's a blood stain. Yeah, it was part of her, and he used it to clean his hands and to clean the blade of his knife.
Correct. That he clearly wiped his blade.
And then he tossed it.
And then he tossed it. Yeah, which again, let's think of forensic techniques at the time. Okay, he wiped his knife here. Okay, well, so we know he cleans his knife and hands. Like nowadays, that would be fingerprints. That would be just.
Oh, dude,
it would be everything, right? It'd be like, okay, thanks.
Yeah, but not then.
But not then, because these were the techniques, and that's important to keep in mind at the time. Police forensics is in its infancy.
It is. It's even by Scotland Yard being one of the. But it's not Scotland. It's the Metropolitan Police. Yeah. Now I read about this chalk message that was on.
That's the one about the Jew. Something about the Juwes. So
Jews. So it was like very racist. So who was it that wiped it off? Somebody wiped it off before anybody could see it or take a picture.
And they were trying. I don't know who that was, but I know they were trying because they didn't want to inflame.
More.
What was? So 1 second. I'll see if I can get the exact quote.
It wasn't. I read it and I was like,
what's the exact quote?
And they spelt Jews in a way that is very
Juwes is how they spelt it, which is completely.
Yeah, that's an offensive way of.
Well, it also looks like a pretty friggin' screwed up spelling. Okay, he said, which he's right off the message. The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing. May have been written by the Ripper and wanted to photograph it. Warren felt that leaving it would be light enough to be photographed would cause riots against Jews living in Whitechapel.
And it would. Well, they were already being ganged up on. It was already. So the police at this time, people are like, what the fuck is going on? Now, and there was a lot of speculation that, people are terrified. Not only are people terrified in Whitechapel, you're starting to get a lot of the elite going, hey, can this flow over to our neck of the woods?
Yeah.
Right. So now it's becoming a bigger issue.
And this is where you start seeing things. So the Whitechapel Vigilant Committee, it starts up. It was at when did it founded? First meeting was September 10th.
Right.
So before the double event, the Whitechapel Vigilant Committee set up. Right. So this is where you start to see people getting together, and this is interesting, where they go off and have what were they? They say volunteers, but their own systems of local patrols using handpicked unemployed men to patrol the streets every evening. Between each of these men received a small wage from the committee, and each patrolled a particular beat, armed with a police whistle, a pair of galoshes.
Yes. Want to have dry feet.
And a strong stick.
Well, that's good.
Right?
Because Jack the Ripper's got a big knife.
He's got a big knife. I'd like a strong, big stick.
Can you please give me a big stick?
So these guys, the Vigilant Committee tried to convince on the 30th the government to persuade to offer a reward. The Home Secretary refused. So
at some point, the Queen gets involved.
I didn't read about the Queen getting involved.
Victoria's like, what the fuck?
So one of the later things when we talk about suspects, there's some bizarre, crazy conspiracies where we didn't
get into a lot of the suspects. I'm interested to hear what you.
Yeah, I did. So I spent a lot of time looking at the suspects because it's fascinating to say, well, why didn't we catch anybody? Did they have any clues? They did, and some of them were more interesting than others. So we had our double event happen, and then this is the third important letter, which again, take it for what you will. It's a letter sent randomly in from Jack the Ripper. Okay. So this was sent in. This is the From Hell letter.
Oh.
Okay. So this was sent in to George Lusk. So George Lusk was the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee.
It was given to him.
Yeah. And it was sent to him on October 16th.
Oh, geez.
Along with part of a kidney.
Oh.
Yes. Half a kidney, as a matter of fact. It was preserved in spirits.
So
from the
there's a pretty good chance that this is the guy.
So this is the thing. So they're not sure at this point. So here, I'll read the letter to you. It reads, "From hell, Mr. Lusk, SOR, S-O-R. I send you half the kidney, K-I-D-N-E. I took from one woman, preserved it for you, t'other piece. I fried and ate it. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife, and like K-N-I-F, that took it out if you only wait a while longer. Signed, catch me if you can, Mr. Lusk."
No,
he doesn't actually sign it, Jack the Ripper. He doesn't sign Jack the Ripper. He signs it, catch me when you can, Mr. Lusk.
Oh.
So he doesn't actually sign it as Jack the Ripper. He signs it as that. And he says, "From hell."
From hell.
So the kidney had been preserved in alcohol and was in fact confirmed to be that of a human female.
How did they determine that?
Okay. So Dr. Thomas Openshaw examined the kidney, concluded it came from a woman about 45 years of age, I don't know how, who suffered from Bright's disease. The disease is a failing of the kidneys as a result of heavy drinking. Edwise was 46 at the time of the murder and was known to drink quite heavily.
Well, as did everyone else in Whitechapel.
Well, yeah, exactly, right. So this is one of those things they considered as a bit of a hoax too, right? They're like, well, this isn't legit, but it was delivered in a box with the letter. So this was one of the first times when you see that trope in literature where organs are being mailed to people.
Well, it's the first.
It's one of the first times I can see.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry I'm boring you, Phil.
I'm sorry. I worked all day today.
Yeah,
I had a lot going on. Look at the burn on my
God. Got burned, I know.
No, this is good. So where does that bring us?
This brings us to the final of the canonical victims, Mary Jane Kelly. So this is the one. If you want to take the lead, you were talking. This is the one I think you know a fair bit about. This was November.
So when I thought of Jack the Ripper, I thought, oh, he did a few things. I really didn't think he was like as fucked up as he was. So yeah, we have Mary. What is it, Mary J. Kelly?
Mary Jane Kelly. November, she died. It was November 9th, 1888.
Yeah, so she was found at 13 Miller's Court. I guess it was November the 9th. Not sure what time it was.
I think she was found sometime in the, she was found.
Morning.
So here's what I got. One of her people that shared the rooming area with her, not her room, but the area, because she had her own room. Get this. What is it? Elizabeth Prater. Mm-hmm. Apparently she heard people moving in and out of the court throughout the night. She left her room around 5:30 in the morning to walk to the 10 Bells pub for a drink of rum, and she saw nothing suspicious.
Well, it's just poor Mary being murdered in her room.
Just poor Mary being murdered.
Yeah. So I think it's a police officer that actually finds Mary in her room, and he describes it as the work of the devil. It was probably the worst mutilation that he did by far. He cut her from rectum to breastbone, so he split her almost in half. He removed many organs. He used an axe to cut her, disfigure her. Basically, by the time he was done, she was just a piece of meat that's been ripped apart. I mean, he just did, horrible things.
There was actually crime scene photographs. You can see how bad
I did have the
pleasure of looking at some of those.
Yeah. Well, they're there. I'm like, oh my God. So he removed all the flesh off of her thighs as well, which is like, he took his time with this body. This was like he had a room, he had all the time in the world, and
she was dead. So all this, again, same pattern. This is why she's one of the canonical five, is asphyxiated, bled out, and then mutilated.
Brutally. Like her face was beyond almost recognition. Right? So, it was utterly horrific. That's the only word to describe. So Jack the Ripper. There he is in a nutshell.
Those are the five canonical victims. Now there were Whitechapel murderers, okay, and I think there were 11 in total, and it actually goes to 1988 or 1889, like the spring of 18. Yeah, but they're not considered part of. In hindsight,
they're considered copycats, right? For the most part,
correct. In hindsight, at the time they weren't sure. It's later on when everything's sort of. They look back and say, okay, these ones were different murders. These were copycat murders or unrelated.
So this is where, the queen is pissed. This is where our little ugly queen says, I've had enough of this bullshit. So she actually calls the PM, Prime Minister, and goes, what the fuck are you doing? And he goes,
I got my best men on it.
I don't know. I got 2 police forces. And then the queen is like, you are going to double your police force. You're going to double whatever you're doing, and you're going to make it much bigger. And then he kind of disappears, right? For the most part.
As far as I know, the last murder associated with Jack the Ripper was Mary Kelly.
Yeah.
That's the last one. And but you still had, like you said, right? The queen said, you got to deal with this. So the amount of, they had cops. Whitechapel never had such good police coverage, which makes you wonder, why did Jack stop? Well, there are cops everywhere. Why?
Well, this is it. There's police fucking everywhere. So, but he could have went somewhere else. There were lots of poverty-stricken places. There was a neat theory about this, is that it took these murders, and actually things got better in Whitechapel because of this. Like, not to say that what Jack the Ripper did was, but there was some good, which was, it was finally addressed how the poverty was. There are theories out there that, whoever did this was actually trying to help Whitechapel.
the good of the many outweigh the good needs of the few. The needs of the many outweigh the needs
attention.
of the few. Spock.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it was a kind of an interesting thing that made me go, "What the fuck?" No, because what happened? How else could have you got attention on such a big scale? For a place
true. All the papers
so
they were eating this up. They were eating this up.
Eating it up, and not only that, finally the Queen, the fucking Queen of England, says, "All right, you need to do something." That takes a lot, you know. Like she's the big kahuna. Literally. She's just, I'm sorry. Anyone from Britain out there watching, I'm very sorry. I mean, we are also part of this Commonwealth.
Hey, I was at a conference with one of my UK colleagues, and we said something about, God save the Queen. And it's like, and I was like, you know what? Both our heads of state.
Yeah,
okay, cheers.
Yeah, sort of. We're across an ocean. We do what we want. We're like the spoiled brat of the Commonwealth. We do our own thing.
I thought we were going to blame Australia for that, like the country of death.
Are they part of?
They are still part of the British Commonwealth, and they still consider there are some anti-monarchists. So
because they were abandoned.
They were a prison colony. At least we weren't a prison colony. Like there's a reason why. I've never been to Australia. I hear it's a lovely place, except when it's either on fire or underwater, or there's spiders the size of horses.
A lot of fun. You know, those people know how to party.
Oh, I have never met an Australian that is not fun to hang with.
Right.
Even that Scott Morrison guy, the guy you see on TV, the prime minister there, he looks like, I'm sure he's a blast.
Oh, God. He's a lush.
I'm sure
they'll die young. Liver cirrhosis.
Shark attack, spider bites.
I mean, fuck. Everything there wants to kill you. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting theory that, it brought a lot of attention. Once all the attention was there, there tended to be more jobs, like things looked better, families were being taken care of.
So
it's a weird sort of,
Is it an unintended consequence of somebody's sick needs, or was it somebody's Machiavellian planning saying, hey, you know what, I can get the press to pay attention to this area? And
one thing, well, this is what I'm saying, that how do I make things noticeable? Maybe somebody's mother died because she didn't have enough, she had to sleep outside.
So it's funny you mentioned that. So we'll talk about some of the suspects and some of the crazy suspects and some of the crazy stuff, like it was so and so.
I don't know.
It goes along you don't. Okay, so
none. No, I'm learning as we go here, because I spent most of my time just learning about Jack the Ripper.
So I spent more of my time delving into the actual who the police thought were, and then I looked into who do the ripperologists? Do you know what a ripperologist is?
I met a few in college. Not different.
Okay. Yeah, probably different. So this is one of those things. There's called ripperologists, and they're basically people who are fascinated with the Jack the Ripper murder investigation, and they've got all theory. They have conferences they get together at. It's huge. It's
like Elvis fans.
Pretty much. Yeah. If Elvis was a murderer, yes.
Elvis. Hey, if there's Elvis fans out there, we also like Elvis.
Wow.
You don't mess with Elvis.
My dad loved Elvis. My wife
is we've been to Graceland.
My dad would have loved to have gone to Graceland. He was a big fan. He loved Elvis as an actor, less as a singer, which is funny because he wasn't a great actor.
He was a terrible actor.
He's an awful actor. But
I've had to watch his movies. It's terrible.
Hawaii, Kissing Cousins.
Oh, my God, my wife.
EI Blues.
So every year my wife makes a cake on Elvis's birthday. This is the extent my wife.
She's turning you into Fat Elvis, Phil, just so we're clear. She's like, does she have the rhinestone jumpsuit?
Oh, yeah. There you go. Assless chaps.
Put it on, Phil. It's Saturday night.
Yeah. Love me tender. But yeah, so anyway, I understand the cultiness behind stuff like this. So
completely. So there's a bunch of there's a bunch of books written, but I want to talk about the 5 main suspects the police had, and the police did have. So when I say police, I'm referring more to our 2 heroes of our story, which are Frederick Albert Aberline and Sir Neville McNaughton. Okay, they had 5 suspects: Aaron Kosmosky, Dr. Francis Tumbletti, Michael Ogstrong, George Chapman, and Montague John DeRoot. Okay, those were the 5.
Okay.
So our good buddy Aaron Chomsky was a deranged Polish barber. Okay.
Well, barbers did minor surgeries.
So again,
tooth extraction.
They would lance boils. The barbers were actually, they would cut, like if you have something they would cut. They could do exactly. They could leech you. They could bleed you. They could stitch stuff up. Right. I mean, maybe not super great.
Right. Wow.
Right.
I mean, better than if I did it.
So he was a Polish Jew and a resident of Whitechapel.
Yeah.
And apparently he was quite insane because of, how'd they quote it? Many years of indulgence in solitary vices. He had a great hatred of women, especially of the prostitute class, and had strong homicidal tendencies, and was removed to a lunatic asylum in March of 1889.
March. So
after all this, but he wasn't, so he was a suspect, but he was never, so full disclosure, folks, they don't know who did it. They don't know, but they had suspects that they only had the flimsiest of evidence. In this guy's case, like, he was crazy. He was in the area.
He fits the MO of
if you start checking some stuff, you're saying, okay, wait a second, he hates women and prostitutes. Okay, because a lot of this stuff suggests that. He was a barber, which suggests some level of skill with blades, right?
Especially scissors. Dangerous.
I think they used mostly straight. I suspect a lot of barbers use the straight razor. That's why I always remember.
For shaving. What about for haircuts?
What was Sweeney Todd? Sweeney Todd was a barber. The people who make people into pies.
I'm Sweeney Todd. What? Yes.
So this was one of those cases of where they, so some of the evidence against him, funny enough, was, some of the evidence against him being the Ripper was that nobody would say he was the Ripper. And part of that was back to the fact he was a Jew, and other Jews were like, well, I don't want to go off and say my fellow Jew is Jack the Ripper.
Right.
Because now all us Jews are Jack the Ripper.
Well, which they've had a bad enough rap.
They've had a bad enough rap, and things have not been going well for them in Whitechapel right now.
Or anywhere else on the planet.
So now there's also some things, signs of mental illness. Apparently he liked to pick up bread from the gutter and eat it.
Well, that tells
apparently
you right
that's the only way he would eat. That's the only way he would eat. He would go off from the gutter. If you handed him to him, he wouldn't eat it.
What?
Yeah, it kind of crazy, right? So he goes off. He spends some quality time in an asylum. Okay, they believed he was delusional, schizophrenic, and incoherent. Okay,
he doesn't sound like a smart man.
No, this does not sound like somebody who could.
No.
So this is where the case kind of starts to unravel.
It sounds like if you gave him a knife and a prostitute, he may do something.
He may do something,
but I don't think he's capable of being this smart.
This cagey and smart.
Yeah, this individual, to me, I mean, I am no profiler by any stretch of the imagination, but he's smart. He's thinking about what he's doing.
This is somebody who's tactical, somebody
who's very tactical. He's checking out where he's going before he's been there many times. He's knowing when the police, he knows their beats, he knows when they're walking around. He also knows his exit or multiple exits.
And he knows what he's doing, right? So this is a man who's bleeding his victims before cutting them open versus hacky.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, and I was all like, even when I'm reading this, I'm like, why is he strangling them and then cutting their throats? And I mean, I don't understand. Oh, okay. Well, I guess if you cut into somebody and their heart's still beating, blood is going to fucking go everywhere. Okay. I mean,
exactly, right? So he's
in my profession, I don't need to know that shit.
So funny enough, this is one of those things where they said, "Oh, we found the Jack the Ripper." So later on, so we talk about let's say, when is it? What am I seeing here? Casebook Jack the Ripper. Naming Jack the Ripper. A newly published book called Naming Jack the Ripper names him as it because it says, "Hey, his DNA. We did some DNA tests, and it's the same." Despite the fact that chain of custody would be so fucked up at this point, and did you know most of the documents for this were destroyed during the Blitz?
No.
Yeah, so a lot of the they recovered a lot. Evidence? Yeah, a lot of it was destroyed during the Blitz.
You would need his DNA though. How would you he would have to cut himself. He would have to leave hair. He'd have to leave something. It'd be so minuscule and not kept properly over.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the okay. So here's the evidence for this. Naming Jack the Ripper. They say. Evidence: fresh analysis of DNA recovered from a century-stained bloodstaining scarf linked to one of Jack to Catherine Edweiss. They recovered another DNA, and it has been linked to the DNA from stains to the genetic signature of some of Edweiss's distant relatives. They say this is linked to Edweiss. And then they had another DNA purportedly attributed to semen on the scarf, was linked to relatives of this Aaron Kamasi.
What'd they find on the scarf?
Semen, apparently.
From Jack the Ripper?
Remember, somebody's writing a book.
Yeah,
Right? So there's not this, but he was one of the suspects the police had.
Yeah.
Right. But they never charged him. So he got institutionalized because apparently he was with an unmuzzled dog and then went all crazy. That's why he was arrested and basically demonstrated his insanity. So they institutionalized him. Right. So he's one of the ones they had. Right. Okay. So another one is Dr. Francis Tumbley. Okay.
Sounds fun.
He was a quack doctor and fake Indian herbalist who was in London at the time of the murders. He was arrested by the police for apparently he liked young men. And at the time that was not allowed in the 1880s.
Not in England, but in Rome.
In Rome. So he was arrested, but he posted bail, and then basically he left. Like he snuck back out of the country. Right. He went to New York. The murders stopped in London after that. The Jack the Ripper murders stopped.
Is there any correlation from murders that may have started in New York at that time?
So this guy, there's no correlation there. Like I said, this is one of those things where they say he was a doctor. Now they say more of a quack, but apparently he had some surgical skill. Apparently he disliked women greatly. Yeah, so it wasn't just I like men, it was like I hate women too. So he was a homosexual misogynist, I guess. And apparently at a conference, he revealed his anatomic collection, specifically his prized collection of uterus specimens.
Oh. Yeah. A bunch of uteral.
This is all hearsay, right? This is he said, she said. Somebody said, oh, he had a collection of it at a conference, and he talked like, how do you start at that conference? Hey, by the way, who wants to look at my collection of stuff?
Yeah. How do you even get a collection of you? Okay.
Yeah. So he was arrested on suspicion of the crimes.
Okay.
But that's not what they wound up charging him with. They charged him with his indecent acts because of his homosexuality.
Okay.
Right. But because those offenses, those offenses weren't actually extraditable. So when he was able to post bail and sneak out of the country, they couldn't extradite him back.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Huh.
So he fled to New York.
He was a fake doctor though.
Completely, yeah, completely.
So would he have the skill, do you think,
to do the level of surgical precision?
Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah. Possibly. I mean, they try to talk about the motives, right? The whole idea that he was like he hated women. He hated women completely. Again, right? And
hate a woman that much.
And he was a big con artist.
Yeah.
So he's got something going on up here. Like to be a successful con artist, you got to have some stuff going on here. Like you have to be.
Did they just say fuck it? They, we're not going to try and extradite him or.
So this is one of those weird things. So he had fled. The Ripper murder stopped, and then you remember some of those other Whitechapel murders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those happened afterwards. So like, well, he couldn't possibly be the victim, or couldn't possibly be the Ripper because he's not here.
Right.
It wasn't until later
they were decided that those are not.
So that's one of those weird things, right? Where it's like, okay. So
he's a conundrum.
He's a conundrum, right? So
I like it.
Yeah. So it's fascinating to see stuff like that, right?
Who do you think it is? If you had to guess.
If I had to guess,
yeah.
I'm gonna say I want to say our third guy here, which is our Michael Ostrog.
Oh.
Okay, so this guy was a Russian con man.
Okay.
With a profuse police record, committed multiple scams and frauds. Was never proved he killed the murder. Never proven he committed the murder. Now, I think he was one of the ones that he was actually jailed for petty offense in France at the time of the Ripper murders, but I like to say he did it because, again, Russian petty criminal.
Because he's Russian?
I don't know. None of these guys have a really strong run. So,
is there any Egyptians? Because I think probably one of those did it.
Well, there's the George Chapman, who was, if you've ever watched, have you watched Murder Maps on Netflix?
No.
So George Chapman was featured in it. He was basically a guy who would marry young women, take their money, and then poison them with tartar of Emmerich.
Jesus.
So he was one of the suspects.
Yeah, but he's doing that for,
okay,
money.
And this is why he wasn't actually.
This is a guy who wants to kill someone. Right. Like he and doesn't see these as people. I mean, he is not seeing these. He's seeing these as animals. He's deeply, deeply sadistic.
Correct.
Like John Wayne Gacy, very deeply sadistic.
There's a need being fulfilled there that's not translatable to a material. So the George Chapman thing, and again, he's a poisoner. He actually had solid alibis. So they're like, okay, but they still believed he did it. So I think Frederick Abelheim said he's our guy.
Yeah.
But he also said this other guy was his guy, Montague John DeWitt.
Montague.
Yes, the son of a prominent local surgeon, an officer of the law, was a bright child.
It's funny you say that he was an officer because it almost sounds like someone who knows how the workings of the police force, right? Yep. Like, okay, we understand how things work, and and you can kind of work around them.
Exactly, right? So, and one of the reasons why he's sort of not associated is he committed suicide in like November, so sometime after Mary Jane Kelly's death.
But why was he suspect? Why?
So he was suspected because they talked about the whole son of a surgeon, right? So they talked about surgery, surgical, right? It's vague, circumstantial, right?
Just because his dad was a surgeon.
So he would have access to knives. He would have access to anatomy books. Maybe son of a surgeon. He's smart, right? But he's also they suspect he had some depression. Like his mother committed suicide at one point, so he committed suicide by drowning himself in the Thames
River. And these
were
their legitimate, suspects.
These were their legitimate suspects. But it's all circumstantial tying him to this at all.
Yeah, it sounds.
Okay, and it's actually the press gets blamed, right?
Oh, okay.
Okay, press gets blamed for this, and the Parliament. So there was a member of the West Dorsetshire, England Parliament, began saying the Ripper was the son of a surgeon who committed suicide in the night of the last murder. And then apparently, journalists and law enforcement officials also collaborated this story.
Weird.
So they linked it back to him, right?
See, I've always heard. I don't even know where it came from. It's like one of those things where you just, that he was a doctor. Jack the Ripper was a doctor. I don't know where that came from. But that was in my head when you said, "Oh, well, we'll do Jack the Ripper." And I'm like,
so funny you mentioned that.
Wasn't he a doctor?
Those were the top five. So you got a Dr. Francis Tumbly, who's a doctor, but I think he's like a doctor.
No, but this was like a legit, in my mind, in my mind's eye, it's a top hat, very well dressed man.
You're interested in Thomas Neil Cream then, who was not necessarily on their top five, but was one of the 100 suspects for it.
Okay.
So Thomas gets a shout out because he's Canadian.
Really?
Thomas Neil Cream was a Scottish Canadian who was born in Glasgow and then raised outside Quebec City.
Oh.
He studied medicine at McGill and later got a postgraduate training in medicine and surgery at hospitals in England and Scotland.
Oh. So while he was there?
So get this. Okay, so After obtaining his medical degree, he began to practice medicine in Canada, but was derailed when he murdered Kate Gardner, his mistress. She was found pregnant and dead from chloroform, one of his specialties when studying medicine, in the alley behind his office. He opened up a practice on the edge of the red light district in Chicago, performing legal abortions.
Oh.
Right?
I don't know if we want to be telling people he's Canadian.
Well, he's the only Canadian on the list I can know of, right?
Yeah.
So he actually eventually got caught poisoning the husband. So a bunch of women were dying around him, right? I mean, coming to illegal abortions, he was poisoning. Like there's a bunch of shady stuff. Get this.
Right.
So he tried to poison the husband of his wife's of his mistress. His partner flipped on him, and he wound up. He was given a life sentence, but his brother managed to bribe the governor of Illinois to commute his sentence to 10 years.
Must have been a big bribe.
Yeah. So he left and traveled to England at that point and began living in Lambeth, central London, where he continued his crime. He would frequent local prostitutes and poison them with strychnine in their drink. He killed 4 women this way, gaining enough media attention for the press to adopt him the Lambeth poisoner.
So he already had a gig.
He did. So he was always, so this is the guy, I mean, again, back to the whole George Chapman thing, right? Does his MO strike me that he's choking people and then mutilating them and taking kidneys?
No.
Right?
I think that's the kind of guy that likes to like give you the drink and then watch and see what happens.
Correct. Now, however,
jerking off in the corner or something
on the scarf, on the scarf, right? Right. Yes. So, but this is the thing. So, however, he was eventually caught and sentenced to hang. So while he was being hanged, his last words in the scaffolding before being hanged were, "I am Jack the."
And they dropped him. Pull the lever.
I couldn't hear you.
I am Jack.
So when you talk, but if again, and I'll send you a picture of him, and when you look at a picture of him, you'll be like, if I were thinking what Jack the Ripper was, this is Jack the Ripper. This is Jack. This is the
top hat. It's
dude. All he needs, like, if he has a cape and a skull cane, this is the dude.
So yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
And that was the only doctor?
Well, again, Dr. Francis Tumbly.
Okay, but
I got a picture of him. He's got like one of those German hats with the spikes in it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'll send you some pictures. You'll have some pictures to use. Yeah, just
perfect. That's what I want to. I need some pictures for these guys. No, that's, I learned a lot about Jack the Ripper. I didn't really know much about him.
Do you know any other weird suspects? Like the weirdest do you know what the weirdest suspect is?
No, what?
Have you ever read Alice in Wonderland?
Yes.
Lewis Carroll.
Lewis Carroll?
Yep.
Really?
He was named a suspect based upon anagrams upon which author Richard Wallace devised her book Jack the Ripper, the Lighthearted Friend. The Fiend. Lighthearted Friend. Wallace argues that Carroll had a psychotic breakdown after being assaulted by a man when he was 12 and became an angry man. Okay. Apparently, Carroll wrote a diary every day in purple ink, but on the days of the Whitechapel killings, he switched to black.
Well, then.
This claim is not taken seriously by any ripperologist, FYI, but it's still.
Okay.
Have you ever heard?
Why.
Go ahead.
No. That's why I always use blue ink for all my journal entries.
Again, a book, right? So if you have a lot of people, speaking of books, so there's a line saying, you either die here or live long enough to become the villain.
True.
So both Frederick Abeline, the lead investigator, the crack detective investigator for this, and Sir Neville MacGothan are also suspects in later books of doing this.
Really?
Yeah. They're saying that Frederick Abeline. So
what if they were working together?
Well,
what if there was more than one Ripper? So there is a theory.
Yep.
There is a theory that there was more than one. There was like a team, right? Like a guy would be on lookout, or what have you. Right? Yep. You would need focus. I mean, to do this, right? You got to focus. No,
you'd think you'd have to. You'd think so. This is to be, but mind you, most serial killers like Gacy only got caught
by being sloppy.
Well, 33 in 7 years, right? Like this was Like had he, okay, sure. So had he stopped at 32 or 30 or 20, he never would have been caught. Like the only person he would have been caught when somebody bought his house and said, "What's that horrible smell coming from the crawl space?"
Right? Oh, you'd have to blow that house up.
Oh yeah.
Why did that? There's bodies everywhere. No, you have to stay in that house forever. We're gonna foreclose. Casey's like, no. Yeah, I don't know, man.
So, Abilene and McNaughton,
so they became suspects too. Of course,
they became suspects in books, right? So there's a diary, the Ripper Diary of James Maybeck, which was another suspect, right? That came up, found by a scrap dealer, miraculously, and he sold it.
I think the story's going to remain a mystery forever.
Oh, completely.
You can't go back in time yet. Maybe Elon Musk can. We'll find out. But
still working to get into space.
He's going to do it.
Well, he did. He said they were reusable rockets. They successfully went to the ISS and came back.
Or he's going to go to Mars. One of the two.
I think he's skipping the moon. I want to say he's skipping the moon because
there's nothing there.
China's going to be building something there.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, those Chinese, they can do it all.
So to conclude, we don't know who Jack the Ripper was. No. We have lots of suspects. None of them are really compelling.
I didn't get too much into that because, to be honest, it's a lot of information when you start reading through the murders and.
Yeah.
But I did learn a lot, so I'm happy about that.
Well, it's a lot of morbid stuff, right? So again, if you focus on the victims, all the suspects themselves, there was, like I said, there was 100 different suspects.
Yeah.
Okay. There were a bunch of them.
Yeah. I mean, I learned a lot about that time period. I didn't know much about it, like I said. And,
that it sucked. That it sucked horribly.
Right? Like I'll be drunk all day on gin.
On gin or opium. Whatever.
Opium. Whatever. Well, if you could afford opium. Otherwise, gin would have to do. Good old gin. Lemon gin, if you can afford lemons. Ugh.
I remember gin and Mountain Dew. Ugh.
Oh, God. It's disgusting.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
Worst drunk I ever had.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess are you wrapping up?
Well, that's the conclusion. We don't know who did it. And if you're interested and you have some theories, flip us a line.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about it the next day. We'll talk about it maybe during the Wednesday rant.
And you can like and subscribe. We would really appreciate that too. We've had some great, subscribers as of late. Our Instagram and our YouTube. Incredible. So I'd like to say thank you. You know what? We really appreciate it.
You make it all worthwhile. You make the likers and the subscribers.
The subscribers. Watch us with my red head. Look at this fucking thing. Anyway, next week's show.
What is our next week's show, Phil?
We are going to do an interview.
With who, Phil? Is it Jack the Ripper?
No.
Oh.
It is Dr. Chris Allen.
A doctor?
He is a doctor.
Jack the Ripper.
Legit.
Could be a Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was a doctor.
No, he's actually going to discuss, we're going to talk about Sasquatch. He's a doctor, and we're going to talk about Bigfoot. Don't you even look at me like that.
Sounds familiar. I seem to remember episode
2, but that's Gary. He was not a doctor.
He plays one on TV, though.
He did play one on TV, I think. And in the bedroom.
That's right. He's got the stethoscope.
Yeah, no, this fellow, we actually began talking on Instagram. I got to know him a little bit. He had kind of an experience when he was young, which really, got him involved in his area of expertise is primate evolution.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. And he had some theories that I'm not really aware of, but I want to hear from him. And, I think we'll have some nice questions, and he can take us in where Gary was more, circumstantial, he talked about a story, but he didn't really have a lot of information. Like you said, he's not an expert. I like to see different point of views of our furry creature.
That's so the Sasquatch week. Episode part 2.
No, this is going to be Dr. Chris Allen.
Dr. Chris Allen.
Sasquatch part 2.
Dr. Chris Allen, Jack the Ripper or Sasquatchologist?
You never know. We'll have to judge.
Yeah, have to judge. Ask about his surgical skill.
No.
And where he was in 1888.
I think he probably was in his great grandfather's area or something. So there you go. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching the OC. I'm Phil. This is my co-host Corey. And until next time, be good. Bye, meat
Take care, folks.
Night, night.